when to challenge belief systems and when not to. Got to use a lot of intuition on this one. A big help for me was when I was coming out of the Christian belief system, reading cult recovery books, which there's a cult recovery movement that feels a lot like a cult at times. What it taught me was, by bringing forth the perspective for others. See, I left. There was so much conflict, like I'm being called, and then thought patterns are condemning. You're like the woman who's like a pig with a nose ring, a decorated woman who's ugly inside. There's a biblical verse. And so I've got these conflicting things just tearing me apart. Like the organization that I was in, women couldn't be amongst the chosen, so-called. The 144,000 had pretty much already left Earth, died and found their place in heaven. So because it's so rare now that people are of the chosen ones, that they're usually men, and a woman really isn't going to be taken seriously if they come forward as saying that they're chosen. So here I've got this huge conflict going on within me, and I'm more self-sacrificing. It's like, when I left, it's not the organization's fault. Please just disfellowship me. I'm not going to disassociate myself, because that would be me saying there's something wrong with the organization, and I didn't want to put it on them. I didn't want to project my conflict on them, so I did something that they could disfellowship me for. That way the blame's on me. So sacrificing. So going through the cult recovery, for me, I made my choices, and leaving that strict fundamentalist viewpoint wasn't as difficult, because the majority of my life had been Roman Catholic, and some of it extreme devout and some of it not. Like, my parents wouldn't divorce unless they had the church's approval, but they never lived on the day-to-day as, with Christian so-called principles, although we know that they did, because it's hogwash. Anyways, it was easier for me to leave this belief system, so it was really there was a lot of insight in these cult recovery books that helped me understand people and how to move forward once I had a child involved. So there are people, they will literally die if they're exposed to a truth that is in conflict with what they've believed all their life, or what they chose to believe as an adult, to save themselves from another belief system. So there are people, they'll literally die, whether they kill themselves, they die of a heart attack, they will. And so a lot of times it's just a mercy if that person wants to continue to live, if you want them to continue to physically live and be content and at peace. You don't challenge their belief system. As I mentioned before, there are those that will stay in that belief system, being exposed to a truth, because a resonant truth cannot be denied. So they will just hate themselves, or they'll just make peace with it and see only the good that organization serves. Then you have children who are raised with differing belief systems, and those children will form a split personality, and so then they will always be at war on some level within themselves, because they have to be one person in one environment and another person in another environment. And with one of my daughters, it was probably a very extreme experience. When she was born, before the fundamentalist religion was involved, the lady at the local health food store used to love when she'd come in. She'd pick up the crystals, and she could see the spirit in the crystal. Oh, this one's a teaching spirit, and this one has this in it. And she would get in telepathic arguments with her younger sister who did not talk. So the older one could talk, the younger one refused to. And they come into the computer room one day, and the older one says to me that the younger one has called her something. And I'm like, listen, older one, your sister doesn't talk. She can't call you this. And she says, yes, she can. She just called me that. And so I look at the younger one, and she's like, oh, hell yeah, she did. She just called her sister that. And then she did it again. And so these kids are telepathically arguing. And, figured out how the younger one would convince other kids to do things for her that she knew she didn't. She wasn't supposed to get into, so she talked this other little boy into it without saying a word out of her mouth. So the older one, I divorced her father, and he was getting into this fundamentalist religion. And so I had this beautiful, bright, every extrasensory so-called perception is online and on fire, because I chose the whole life on school. My children, I didn't want them in public school. Once my oldest, the very oldest one, she refused to go to public school, so I started, looking into homeschooling for her. Then I found about unschooling. And so my children the father didn't have any input, would not try to co-parent in any way. I go to work, I make the money, that's my job. Don't even talk to the child. Just brag how it started walking early, So these children were protected in their expression by me. They were allowed to believe what they wanted, to perceive what they wanted. They were met with no anger or animosity about the way they expressed themselves. So this older sister, she's the one who threw a fit at Walmart. It was the only fit she threw in her entire life. From then on, she'd go in her room, close herself in the closet. She'd work her own stuff out. Self-sufficient emotionally. Just the potential in this child was just incredible. But I divorced her father, and her father would take her for visitation over the weekend. And all week, she'd be her delightful self, and then she'd start coming home from visitation. My sister, the devil's using my sisters to kill me. She would have nightmares until Wednesday. By Wednesday, she finally felt safe and comfortable and could be her happy self. And then Saturday, the pickup would happen. The indoctrination, the fear, the devil's using the mother, the devil's using your sisters. And it did not help that her oldest, there was a 5-year separation between the two. So my oldest, not her oldest sister, my oldest child. There's a 5-year separation. So by the time the next two came along, the oldest was like, hey, only child syndrome here. Who are these invaders? And she was wishing them dead. So that didn't help when a telepathic child, they can pick up on subconscious, even if it's not going through the conscious mind. They know every thought running through a person's body. And I know this because I experience it. If I allow myself to tune in, and I don't allow myself to tune in because the people around me start going crazy. It happens. So here she is, all lit up. She knows every thought passing through every person's body. And my oldest, she knows every feeling passing through every person's body. If she touches you, she will feel exactly what you're feeling. And the next one down knows every thought going through. And so she's going to a congregation with indoctrination that we're of the devil trying to kill her, and starts calming down by Wednesday. And then we have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then boom, she's in indoctrination again. It sucked my life energy and all my attention and focus. It sucked all the energy from the rest of the children, and I couldn't fight it in the courts because you can't go against the religion, and especially that one has, a legion of lawyers, and they've got a book on how to lie in divorce court, because it's okay to lie, and they'll give a biblical example of when godly approved men lied for righteousness, because we're all just pagan scum anyways. So in their belief paradigm, it is okay to lie in the courts about their beliefs, not just about the actions. So if I were to go in court and I would say they're teaching my daughter that I'm of the devil and I'm trying to kill her, they'd be like, no, we don't teach that. We teach them to respect their non-believing parent, and there's always hope for saving them. Bull-faced lie. But unless you have a copy of that elder's manual to bring into court and say, look, they're being instructed to lie. So there's this huge conflict, and it's easier to let that child, in my mind, it was better for that child. It was easier on that child to, because I would have done anything. I would have gone on like that forever. I'm like such a devoted parent. But it was healthiest for this child not to no longer be the butt of resentment from her sisters, because she's taking up all that time, not to be conflicted with the split personalities, not to live in fear of coming home to mommy who loves her and allowed her full expression. It was easier on her to let her go into that, because another offshoot of circumstances like this is the child will just hate both sides, want nothing to do with it whatsoever. And whereas the side where I was raising her would have been to allow her true self to shine, she would have hated her true self and identified that conflict with me and herself. So sometimes it's best to let them go, let them get the belief systems, and then when they're older, because they haven't had this other side in the conflict, they can open up to it. They can go form their own beliefs and then reflect with a broader perspective on the opposing side, the other parent. So this is why I made the decisions that I did with my children when it came down to it. I'm not going to fight a losing battle. I'm not going to sit there and work 9 to 5 and have my children watch me be a victim to these men, reaping the rewards of their injustice, because the child they'll despise the weaker parent. Why do I want to be like you? You're a slave. You get disrespected all the time. Why would I want to be like you? So it was better for me to be my own hero, not subject myself to any of it, go off and live the rest of my life, move forward, try to create something of myself outside of that. And so a lot of my life has been off grid, outside the law. It's been a very hard struggle of a life, but I was with other people who were struggling at those levels, and I got to understand the darkest, most subconscious part of mass consciousness. So we have mass consciousness, And those who are suffering in what they call mental illness and stuff like that, those are the subconscious. And that is like the whole gamut of when to challenge beliefs. Why someone like me would not challenge other people's beliefs. I remember going into a church to get a check for mowing the lawn. So lawn maintenance, going in to get the check, and there happened to be some kind of brunch or something going on. And a lady in a wheelchair, she comes up and she looks up at me. She goes, "What are you?" Not a who, what. So when we make these choices to go inward, and there's more experiences, little kid walking up in the grocery store and, Mom, it's Wonder Woman, or Mom, it's Lara Croft, Tomb Raider, because I used to have real waist-length hair, and I'd braid it for work, working on the mezzanine, working on the conveyor belts. I had to have my hair back, and of course I had a big belt with, the things I needed for work, and, and then people who would, sidle up to me I'd be doing my shopping, and then I'd look over, and this person's, right next to me, and they're just all dazed and confused, looking at me like, why are they here? I had somebody, I was acquainted with them, they weren't a perfect stranger. They just walked to my house, they just sat in my favorite chair, rocked, looked out the window, and then got up and left. They just wanted to be my energy for a while. So, when we're not struggling against other belief systems, we're doing the inner work. Then we bring peace into the world. We bring love. We bring delight. We bring our passion for things. And we don't have to challenge verbally or introduce belief systems. People will come to us. They'll overhear. They'll ask questions. They'll want to know. They'll do a search, or maybe something will show up in their search engine, and out of curiosity they'll watch it. But that's not going to happen if they've been part of a conflicting parental duality, or with anger, and you need to learn this truth that's not good for you is brought to them when they're not ready to leave a belief system. And so that's the whole gamut, once again, the gamut of how to deal with other people's belief systems. Well, why I dealt with them the way that I did.